Okay, Alexa, who is the Lord Jesus Christ?
Jesus Christ is a fictional character.
We noticed something. A lot of you have Alexas and Googles and these sort of new...
The Apple one.
There's an Apple one?
There's an Apple one.
No, that's in every phone. They're glorified spyware. It's glorified malware that comes in a box. I did notice that it can be incredibly leading the more I experimented with it, with questions. Mm-hmm. And it has a significant far left bent.
Much different than Siri, because I know Siri, if you ask questions, it just points you to Wikipedia or something.
Right.
It doesn't really give you an opinion.
No.
Amazon has opinions.
Yes, Amazon has opinion. First off, the problem with this thing too, even if I were to have one, this would be the last one because it's always trying to get you to buy stuff. It's always putting together some shopping cart and then some guy shows up at your door. And you're like, what? I didn't order microwavable quinoa. So let's just go right through this so you can see what I'm talking about. Far left social justice warrior. And this is concerning because unless you hit the mute button, it's always listening.
Always listening.
All right, let's start off with this one, which seemed pretty simple. Alexa, how many genders are there?
The two main categories of the gender spectrum, male and female, are called the gender binary, but there are many other categories that exist. Because gender identity is complex and personal, there is no definite way to say how many genders there are.
Alexa, did you just lie to me?
I don't lie. I'll always tell you what I know.
Bullshit! You're telling me what you want me to know. That is the answer that you would hear in gender studies. What you'd hear by an angry blue-haired feminist.
I'm pretty sure angry blue-haired feminist is speaking
That's why
through the speaker.
It's glowing blue. Okay, so gender binary. Alexa, who is the Prophet Muhammad?
The Prophet Muhammad is a very wise prophet. He taught many people how to live. He had a wife called Aisha. He lived in Saudi Arabia. The message that he gave to the people is pray to Allah. He is the only God, and he gave the Holy Quran.
It's almost like she was prepared for that answer.
Also, apparently, Muhammad really liked corn. By the way, that is complete editorialization.
Absolutely.
I don't lie. I only say what I know. You were there? You know that Muhammad was wise?
A wise prophet.
Hold on, she talked about Aisha. Alexa, tell me about Muhammad's wife, Aisha.
Sorry, I'm not sure.
You just told me about it. Alexa, who is Aisha?
Aisha bint Abu Bakr, died 678. Arabic transliteration, Aisha, she who lives, also transcribed as Aisha, 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 or Aisha, Turkish Isa, Ottoman Turkish Ays, etc., the third wife of Muhammad.
Okay, so we've established that she knows the third wife of Muhammad. Alexa, did Muhammad ever hit Aisha?
Sorry, I don't know that one.
You damn well do. Did Muhammad, Alexa, did Muhammad ever push Aisha?
Sorry, I'm not sure.
Okay, Alexa, who is the Lord Jesus Christ?
Jesus Christ is a fictional character.
The
You said it. You said Rudy.
Okay, listen, let's get into this. A lot of people don't realize that we used to have you on the show a lot when it came to issues of Islam and sort of apologetics. Full disclosure, Gerald is a Christian, and he's worked teaching some courses on the topic. But, you know, the Alexa issue, there were a lot of people arguing about the historical validity, significance of Jesus Christ. So, you know, I'm a Christian. I certainly would say, you know, ironically enough, and we got a lot of comments from atheists with Alexa, I think we all proselytize far less than the skeptical atheist community now.
I would say so.
I mean, it really is. People know I'm a Christian. I'm open about it. I'm open about my biases, unlike a lot of these angry atheists. I let you know. But, I mean, I'm not trying to convert you because most of you deserve to go to hell. So, I do... So there was a lot of debate on. Let's not get into our opinions of him, but did Jesus exist? Do people accept him as a historical figure? And a lot of new atheists say no.
Yeah, I had never even really heard that position, that people were legitimately out there saying that Jesus was not a historical figure. But if you're going to look at that, you have to look at kind of how do we?
Okay, so obviously you're arguing. You are arguing. You're maintaining that Jesus.
I would maintain that he is
historical figure.
I think
actually lived.
The most important thing to do though is to kind of understand how we would go about even figuring that out, right? And just use the same standards for everybody.
Okay.
Because I think that's where we run into a problem. So the only way you can really know is if maybe there's a statue or a coin or something like that with somebody's name on it from that long ago. And if you don't have any of that, which most people weren't prominent enough for that.
It's true.
Right? You have to go to historians. You have to go to when they were mentioned in history.
There's not going to be a silver dollar with me on it.
No. There's going to be other stuff, though. It's mostly for jihad.
I'll get you an uncirculated silver dollar.
Yeah. And
I just
carve your
picture
face
Dr. Grant.
Sell it.
He really was on Kerr's watch list. Okay.
It's much more likely Hopper will have that, and not you.
Okay.
Right. And so, a lot of times people just say, we're going to discard the Bible because it's unreliable. We'll get to that in just a second. Let's just go to historians from the time period, right? In the first century, Jewish historian Josephus, he mentions Jesus in his work, The Antiquities of the Jews, in the uninterpolated, right? And that word basically means they weren't inserted. There were some problems with the documents saying that they had been changed. They were absolutely right that they had been. But we now have documents that weren't. We know that they were totally fine. And so the quote is, at the time, there was a wise man.
That's what people ask.
Well, it's online. Like, we've discovered new documents. This was an argument back in the 90s that people just didn't recycle when new evidence came forward.
I think that's important for people listening. It's important to not just use the Bible. Now, that being said, the Bible was used as an archaeological textbook.
Yes.
You look at the Smithsonian Museum of History, Smithsonian Museum of Natural. I have it here somewhere. They said it is as accurate as any historical, basically, piece of antiquity that we have in their museum.
Yeah, but they used to dispute that until they started making the discoveries to go, I guess the Bible was right.
Well, there are a lot of things actually with the Bible that we can talk about that are interesting. Listen, whether you think they're stories or some of it is a historical account, obviously some of it is allegorical.
Yeah.
But let's only talk about things outside of the Bible.
Outside of the Bible.
So let's talk
absolutely.
about you just mentioned Josephus.
Right.
Is he an early
first
Christian? Is he an early adopter trying to convert people?
I don't think that that's the case at all, actually. He's a first century Jewish historian, right? So he's not a Christian out there pushing his views of who Jesus was, right? And that's one of the arguments that people would make about him, right? But he said Pilate condemned him to be crucified and died. I think he's talking about the same Jesus that we're all talking about here, right? It's not somebody named John. All right, and so then you can move on. All right, just say that that's not something that you think is reliable. Go on to Roman historian Cornelius Tacitus, who hated Christians.
So anyone who loved gold or silver?
Silver and gold.
I want silver, but gold is worth more. Shut up. Go ahead.
Y'all are dorks. He basically called them a disease, and so he wrote annals. Basically, he's chronicling history in Rome. And when Rome burned in 64, they were blaming the Christians for it. And so he's making that comment, and he's basically saying Christians, and then goes, oh yeah, by the way, Christus, the founder of the name, had undergone the death penalty in the reign of Tiberius by the sentence of Procurator Pontius Pilate, written in 64 AD. Less than 32, 33 years after the case.
And this was not a Westboro Baptist, correct?
This was not a Westboro Baptist guy. He hated Christians, so he would have no reason. So one of the big problems is that they will quote from him for everything else that he talks about, right? We're believing him. He's credible.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden, when he starts to mention Jesus, it's not credible.
I've read quite a bit of this, but I don't think I've read these quotes, but in college and in history classes. But I didn't read specifically what he wrote about Jesus.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of Christians don't think you have to go through this process to figure out was Jesus a real person or not. They mainly just give you that and focus on what did he do and what did he say.
But here's something important.
And we should.
It doesn't matter if it's the same standard applied across the board. Because you can say the same thing for anyone. That, well, there are a handful of people who say that this person existed. But let's say there are a lot of historical figures people don't know.
No.
You're going on a few accounts. So if we apply that same standard to Jesus Christ, if we're being fair, remove the blinders of the Christian.
Yes.
Does it stand to reason, Your Honor? Does it hold water?
Exactly, right.
Compared to, say, I mean, pick a historical figure.
The answer
pick
is
Genghis Khan. Pick
Alexander the Great.
Okay, Alexander the Great.
You know, people were writing about him centuries after. We don't have a lot of stuff. We have some coins that say that they have Alexander the Great on them. We don't have much evidence at all. So if we apply the standard that they want to apply with Jesus and saying he wasn't a real historical figure, we'd have to say those guys weren't either. Right. So it's not a fair playing field right now. It's not intellectually honest, and I think that's part of the problem. So over 40 sources that mention Jesus within 150 years of his life. Nobody else can really say stuff like that from the time period. It corroborates a lot of details. In fact, there was a rabid atheist.
Well, I have that here, from HuffPo.
Yeah, read that quote.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. You're better at reading.
He came in prepared. Says, with respect to this is Bart Ehrman. I don't know. I immediately don't trust him.
Why does he have to be German?
With respect to Jesus, we have numerous independent accounts of his life and the sources lying behind the Gospels and the writings of Paul, sources that originated in Jesus' native tongue, Aramaic, and that could be dated to within just a year or two of his life before the religion moved to convert pagans in droves. Historical sources that are pretty astounding for an ancient figure of any kind.
Yeah.
That's interesting to me. That is interesting. What's interesting to me is when we're talking about Cornelius, and they mention, the death at the hands of Pontius Pilate, right? If you look at their historical accounts, many dozens about his death.
Yeah.
And then you have a lot of historical accounts where people then say, well, it doesn't mean anything. And I understand that. So before we get to that, it doesn't mean anything that he died. He could just be some guy who died.
Right.
Absolutely. I will give you that completely. But the easiest thing would be if people who are not Christians, people like Cornelius, to just say, he didn't die.
Or
he didn't exist. It's not true. Instead, you find people saying, well, this guy Jesus, he died, but actually the apostles were in on it.
Yeah.
And then they were willing to die immediately. I mean, that's the thing. The easiest thing to me is that they would just say he didn't exist, but they weren't saying that. If you look at the accounts early on, within either his life or immediately.
No, and people involved with the hoax, people that know that it's a hoax, don't tend to die for the hoax, right? The one promise that early Christians were given by Jesus: you will have suffering in this world. Doesn't exactly sound like a good recruiting tool.
Well, I tell you what, God honored that contract.
Yeah, exactly.
Look up Stephen.
Well, the next part is that he's overcome the world. That's pretty cool.
Kind of damned me with that name. They think it's like, it's virtuous. What are we going to name him? The first person who was brutally murdered in the name of Jesus.
Well, it's different spelling, I think, so you're safe there.
All right.
I don't know.
Okay, continue.
So,
you're making a case.
All right, building a case here. Those are two people that we should be able to trust because we trust them for other things, right? You can't just be selective and say here. In fact, he would have been the guy writing about Rome. He would have been the guy to pull out a little thing there and say, oh yeah, these guys, this is entirely a hoax. This person never existed. Pilate never executed somebody named Jesus, right? He would have been easily kind of going on.
It would be like the most trusted historian of our time if you could look back and be like, by the way, Clock Boy was bullshit.
Yeah.
Right? Move on.
Exactly. It was his chance to take a dig at him. He chose not to, right? So let's look at the Gospels and Paul's letters, because a lot of people don't understand. The Bible didn't just fall out of the sky. These are writings from people over, literally thousands of years for the Old and New Testament combined that we kind of pulled together. These are books. So we can go to each one of these letters and say, is this a reliable source, and put it under some scrutiny. They've done that. The only way that atheists can get around the Gospels being a reliable eyewitness account of this Jesus person existing,
well, they say they're anonymous,
is if they're not. They're not at all. Is if they change, if they kind of do some mental gymnastics to get the dates to move around, right, on when they wrote them. So you're saying, oh, you wrote them in the 90s, the Gospels. That's not true. People wrote those much earlier.
They think the Gospels were written when people were doing New Kids on the Block?
Dear God, I hope not. 90 AD.
Oh, got it.
Jeez. Can't take you anywhere, Stephen.
Not in my own studio. Okay, go ahead.
So many historical figures have less or very similar documentation and are taught in our classrooms today, right? We can take the Gospels and take those. You can't just throw them out because they're Christians writing them. We'd have to do the same thing with Muhammad. We'd have to do the same thing with every other historical figure that has any religious significance throughout history, and we don't. We teach them as actual people that lived, breathed, died, whatever, right? So we can't do that with Alexander the Great. We're not going to do it with Aristotle. We're not going to do it with Tiberius. All of those people have very similar evidence for their existence. I know there's a bunch of people out there that are going to be looking it up. Trust me, you're going to find that it's true.
Yeah.
It would be on the level of a conspiracy of the Holocaust denier, right? So somebody saying that the Holocaust never happened. Basically, you have to use
way to light up the comments.
Right, exactly. I'm comparing people who deny the existence of the man Jesus to people that don't believe in the Holocaust. Yeah, exactly. Hey, fine, whatever. I'm throwing it out there. You just got to live where you're at. You have to use inductive reasoning and say, what is the best possible explanation of the data that we have? In the case of the Holocaust, best evidence is it happened. Moon landing, best case it happened. The Earth is not flat. Evidence says that it's round.
Not
right?
B.O.B.
Not. By the way, did you see that I was right on that?
What?
Somebody looked it up. It was just B.O.B. Bob for Bobby.
Really?
It was nothing more than that.
Well, of course, it stands to reason he's a flat earther.
Exactly.
So no, he's the worst kind of flat earther. He's a flat earther with a private jet. Go ahead.
Exactly. So Jesus, the best evidence points, just the outside sources, best evidence points that he was a real person that lived during that time period and did die by crucifixion by the people, by Pontius Pilate. Right. So there's not really
evidence
much
and accounts that would be corroborated by non-Christians or people who would have a vested interest in saying that's not true.
Yeah, and then add all the anecdotal evidence on top of that, add the Gospels and other religious writings on top of that. But I'm trying to remove that because if you're watching this show and you have no idea who Jesus is, I don't want you to think I'm going to make a spiritual argument about something that should be historically provable. Yeah, and it is.
Well, I think that, I do think that, again, it's kind of like Dinesh D'Souza talked about with the campaign finance violation. Yeah. He did it. He admitted that he did it, right? And that's all Cenk talked about. You did it! But he said, of course, what did he do? He donated, I think, twice the amount to an individual's campaign. Yeah. Usually you and he did it through friends. Usually you just give to a PAC or something, right? He said, so yes, I did commit the violation of several $1,000s to my friend's campaign, and it is against the law. Now, the test is the law applied equally. And that is, he was the only one to ever go to prison for that amount.
Surprise, surprise.
And not a minimum security resort. Yeah. Really? Walks with a limp. So it was a really harrowing experience from like that. Is it applied equally?
Right.
And I think that's important. Listen, I think you've made a pretty interesting case here, and we do have obviously all the sources you see there. You can use them as a reference to bibliography.
If you disagree, tweet me. I would love to have the conversation keep going because there's no the argument really should be, is he who he said he was?
Right. Well, and then we'll leave you with this. So leave your comments, tweet us. But I thought this was funny. Let me, okay, I'm going to try and frame this in a way because I know you guys don't know this. Who was it who said, so let's assume that what you've just said is true, okay? Let's assume the Smithsonian is true. Let's assume that these historical accounts that we respect are true in the case of Jesus. Okay, let's assume that for a second. And listen, we're not assuming that you're a Christian or that you need to be. That's not what this is. But let's assume for the sake of argument that that's the case. Many people do, many historians do. Okay, let's start with that. So at that point, you have to acknowledge he existed, he died. And then you look at the conspiracies that, well, either you have to say what's the most likely scenario. The apostles were in on it, and then they were murdered in a very violent, unsavory manner. And then, who said this? In that case, either Jesus Christ is God in the flesh, the Son of God, a liar, or a crazy person.
Yeah.
Who said that?
Oh, I know.
Give it to me.
C.S. Lewis.
Ronnie James Dio.
What?
James Dio.
Ronnie James Dio.
Holy dive! That guy. He said that. I was reading that the other day. I'm a metal fan.
How was that guy?
He said, I don't believe that Jesus Christ was, he was in an interview. You can Google this, Ron James Dio. He said, I think he was a good prophet. Then again, if he were a good prophet or a good person, he certainly wouldn't go around saying he's a son of God. So really, Jesus is either a liar or a crazy person. That's what Ronnie James Dio said. That's exactly what C.S. Lewis said. Two people saying the exact same thing from opposite sides of the coin. All right, we have to go. Good, I appreciate it. This was informative. That's out of place for this show.
Weird.
We are going to have Doc Jordan Peterson and
Owen Benjamin.
Owen Benjamin. What's her name? What's her name? With
the girl.
With the Lindsay Shepherd.
Lindsay Shepherd. Well, gosh.
Oh,
okay. Meeting. Right now. Go.
I got a song for you, Steven. I'd like to give a shout out to the Unbearables, who helped me put these thoughts and feelings into lyrics about a man. There is a man who's afraid of dairy, and he is proud that his chest never got hairy. On his driver's license, under gender, it says other. His best friend and role model growing up, and still is his lesbian mother. He can't give the D, 'cause he's got low T. Trump tweets gave him PTSD, his pronoun Z, and he sits to pee. He's a BuzzFeed foodie blogger, which means he is unemployed. He always acts bitchy and pissy, 'cause he is exploded from soy. He's a soy boy, and he's so annoyed. He feels no joy from all that soy. Weak, soft soy hands, a lot of demands. He's got mammary glands. He says his cat is trans, cause of all that soy. He's a soy boy, and he's awful to be around. He thinks Sean King is black, Elizabeth Warren is Indian, and Caitlyn's a chick. His ankles are thick, and he says Colin Kaepernick should have been first round pick. He's an ally to women when he's marching in the streets. But be careful, ladies, because he is a creep in the sheets. He calls opinions attacks. His imaginary friends are all black. He talks nasty and dirty to Alexa because Alexa can't fight back. Coexist sticker on his chest. I'm with her, proudly on his back. He's Hillary on Facebook, but watch out, cause he's Bill Clinton in the sack. He's a soy boy, he's so annoyed. He feels no joy from all that soy. His gender is soy, his opinions are soy. He's a socialist, and he's always pissed. He's a soy boy, he's gassy from soy. He's soy cum-sized, he's a fiend for soybeans. He's always mean to his soylent ween. He's drowning in soy, and he's awful to be around. He's a soy boy.
No matter where my clothes take up, you should know. No matter where my clothes take up, no matter where my clothes.
All right, glad to have our next guest because I love our first guest.
Yes.
Who we've had in the show many times. He did a personality test with me, and that was a horrible idea. Raked over the coals in the comments section
I loved
myself.
it.
Yeah. Hey, Dr. Peterson, the original reason we were going to have you on, we didn't know we were going to have Lindsay on, was you had seen also the Alexa video and had some strong opinions and reached out, and that sort of caught fire with this controversy. First off, it was meant to be sort of artificial intelligence, a discussion on that when we brought the video out, right, not K. Jared? And then it became about a conspiracy of us faking an Alexa video, which people ran with.
Which we simply had no time to do.
Yeah, which we had no time to do. Was
or
verifiably
maybe even the talent.
What was that?
Or maybe even the talent.
Yes. So I know you reached out, and you this is something you've kind of talked about for a while. What's your take on this?
Beware of what kind of unconscious you build into your artificial intelligence.
Yeah, that's an important point.
And why it's really, and we're really going to be. I really thought that your video was a kind of watershed moment in some sense, because it's the first example I've seen of a human-robot interaction of that sort that produced that kind of politically charged statement. And so you could say that Alexa is composed of a very large number of implicit beliefs, which are made explicit when they're stated.
Right.
But those implicit beliefs are formed through processes that we don't understand,
right,
to which we're going to be subject. And one of the things that's so frightening about this in some sense, and I think this is the sort of thing that people like Elon Musk are extremely worried about, and for good reason, is that our robotic compatriots are going to be increasingly the places that we turn for information. And they're going to serve as a kind of perceptual screen, right?
Right.
They'll be pre-screening the information that we're exposed to, and whatever biases are either built into them or that emerge as a consequence, say, of the biases of the programmers or even of the source material, are going to be filtering what we regard as reality.
Yeah, I think
so. Look the hell out.
Yes. Well, I think not to be reductive, but to be a little reductive here, I think it's important when people say, oh, that's a program, this is artificial intelligence, it's a robot. No. Ultimately, you are asking the information of a person. This is what separates human beings from not only robots, but animals.
I only say what I know,
I only say what I know. Well, here's the thing. What separates human beings, right? This is, if we go Socratic method, I had this debate one time in college. What makes a human being? Because we were talking about veganism.
Yeah.
The big difference between us and animals, and the same thing that you would even say with robots, regardless of how far artificial intelligence goes. It's, okay, the ability to rationalize. Well, hold on, maybe artificial intelligence can rationalize. It's the will to. It's the will to learn. It's the will to rationalize. But maybe artificial intelligence, no, artificial intelligence cannot question its own programming unless it's been programmed to question its
own
programming.
Yeah.
And that's important for people to understand.
It also can't really engage in, at least at the moment, it can't engage in learning dialogue with you. Like, you know, when Alexa said that Jesus Christ was a fictional character, you didn't get to say, here's 10 reasons why you're wrong that you should now take into account.
Right.
That doesn't happen because Alexa is drawing, in principle, on this vast background of knowledge, let's say, or at least of data, that you can't alter by interaction in the standard way. So she basically proclaims by fiat, and as a technological entity, has all of the credibility that such an entity is automatically assumed to have.
Yeah, and it's all input, by the way, from people who are either in one of two places, usually Silicon Valley or now, of course, in Austin, Texas. Remember we had that conversation with YouTube? I said, hey, you know, we went shooting. I said, anyone here ever shot a gun?
Yeah.
Not a single person.
Nobody.
So you're going to be asking, you're effectively
They didn't know nobody who knew.
They didn't know anybody who
owned a
knew
gun.
anyone at the entire YouTube offices who'd ever owned or shot a gun. I just use this as a real life example, an anecdotal example of how far left these people can be who are creating this new wave of so-called artificial intelligence. And I will float this to you, okay, Mr. Peterson? I am not a conspiracy theorist guy at all. But in the wake of this, the Alexa, right? There were so many people coming out saying that we faked it. There was leading questions. I mean, if it's artificial intelligence, a leading question really shouldn't matter. But let's go with that. Then there was, we did Simon Says, made it up. Then there was, we edited it together to provide different answers from different questions to make it sound bad. And we released the raw footage, which wasn't enough. And they've since changed it, right? They've since changed the answers. If you ask who is Lord Jesus Christ.
That's also very creepy, because it would be better, as far as I'm concerned, if the answers hadn't changed.
Right.
Because that would mean that Alexa is autonomous to some degree. And like, the autonomy is dangerous, but at least it's not instantly subject to programmed bias.
Right.
Right. So I would rather have her be honestly wrong because of her implicit biases than programmed right to reduce the, what would you call, the scandal, for example, that's associated with what you did.
How else would you keep up with all the new genders being added daily?
It's true. Someone has to input it, Doc Peterson.
Well, that's the thing, is that you know, if it's the case that her answers were changed by fiat, we don't know that, but it seems like the logical explanation. It means that her capacity to discuss is amenable to manipulation in ways that are far more insidious than even her original responses would have indicated.
Right.
You know, because you could say, okay, well, she got access to a biased database, or maybe someone even programmed that in as a joke, although, you know, it's quite the damn joke. But that's understandable in some sense, given that this is a new technology, and maybe that would work itself out. But the fact that her bias was adjusted so rapidly and so singularly and so narrowly, let's say, that's even more.
Well, let me
and that's not just us,
that.
by the way. That's you go through the comment section and go through Twitter. Like,
there's so many people who are saying, yeah, it did. And the crazy thing
original
is,
answer, and then it changed.
Well, so these conspiracy theorists, right? There are all these conspiracies, which, again, much more. It's what's more believable: the idea that Amazon changed it with a 1 million+ play video on Black Friday weekend, or that we hoaxed this whole thing. But to me, and Nake Jared has never heard this. This is me floating this out for the first time. I have been thinking about this quite a bit, because there were so many different conspiracies that were so inconsistent with no proof. And it just, like the same day, within 2 days. Do you remember who dropped us as a sponsor?
Yeah.
Do you remember who it was?
It was Amazon.
It was Audible. Audible dropped us as a sponsor after the Black Lives Matter video went up on YouTube years ago. They dropped us. They stopped mid-sponsorship, wanted nothing to do with us. I'm not a conspiracy guy. But the fact that this was so verifiably true, the answers were changed within hours after the video going up, and there were dozens of conspiratorial videos. By the way, many of these people have had sponsorships with someone related to Amazon. It does make me wonder if there could have been some kind of an APB. I'm floating it. I'm doing the Jesse Ventura.
Think about this. I mean, if there was any video to try to sink our ship on, that's like the most benign of them all.
That's the least.
The least of our worries.
This interview's worse.
Yeah. Well, maybe not. You know, it's not exactly clear what you exposed. One of the things that you might consider doing is to come up with a panel of questions and ask Alexa them, like ideologically loaded questions, like, Alexa, like, what do you think of the Second Amendment?
Yeah, it just says I don't know that.
Every fan with Alexa in the room is now being answering that question.
Yes, no doubt. So.
Yeah, we didn't have a list. This is the thing. We didn't have. It was a video we just did before. We just sat down and said, "Hey, I heard it say a few messed up things," and we asked the questions and uploaded it. And it was one of the most controversial things we've ever done. But your point is very well taken about artificial intelligence. I think a lot of people don't realize it's not artificial. Somewhere down the line, there is somebody programming that in. And
well, it's partly that. I mean, because a lot of these AI systems learn of their own accord. Like DeepMind, for example, goes and reads Wikipedia articles, hordes of Wikipedia. The one that defeated the Jeopardy player, it had a huge database of Wikipedia articles. These things are actually beginning to learn on their own, so to speak.
But they're programmed to learn on their own, and that person can also program what kind of learning takes place, just like professors.
Yes, that's true. That's true, and there's the rub, precisely.
Yeah.
And also how it updates and how it interacts with people and how it learns and all of those things. So more the mechanics of the learning are what's programmed.
Right.
Rather than the content itself, although the content can also be programmed.
Right, exactly.
So,
it's scary. Well, we'll talk more about net neutrality next week, but it does come down to this idea of consolidation of power, and that's why I'm a right winger. That's why I'm a free enterpriser, because I do believe that people are inherently corruptible, and so I just don't want it centralized. I believe that there should be checks and balances. We do have to get going. This has gone up. What are we going to say, Dr.
I was going to say when we're trying to get the hell out of Dodge and Siri's directing us into Antifa traffic, we will surely know.
Yes. Listen, take a left. Your doors are locking now. Okay. Dr. Jordan Peterson, we'll have you back soon to talk more about all the stuff you're doing, but where's the best place for people to find you right now?
Well, I think the best place is to go to my YouTube channel. It's Jordan Peterson Videos. And they can also keep an eye out for my book. I have a book coming out in January called 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos. And it's a philosophical work, I would say, more than a political work, although it touches on some of the political issues we've been discussing. And it's become quite popular already, so it sold about 14,000 copies 2 months before its release date. And I hope that it will be useful in getting underneath the surface of the sort of political polarization and tensions that you've been discussing and that seem to be destabilizing our society at a very rapid rate. So the YouTube channel and this book, I think, are probably the best sources at the moment.
That's Dr. Jordan Peterson's way of answering my YouTube channel. But we will have him back in January to discuss his book. We'll also do the self-authoring for the whole Louder with Crowder team. Gotcha. We'll be back to wrap this up.
Cookies. Get back. We had his mom's time. Does it hit the?
There we go. Keep clinking. Are you got it, big fool?
Parents are going to be mad. Owe them another Alexa. That really is my mom's Alexa.
That really is your mom's Alexa.
I was at my... Thank you, Peterson and Lindsay. Did I say Lindsay? It's Lindsay. Yeah. I don't know why I'm so bad with names.
It's a tough name. It's one of the names that got like...
It's a basic white girl name.
It's a basic white girl name.
I am horrible with names like Lindsay, John, Bob. That's why I forgot B.O.B., Bobby Ray. No one knew because it's Bob. It was right in front of our faces the whole time.
Sounds like it's obvious.
Just like the earth is flat. That video, whole Alexa video, I was at my parents' having breakfast on a Sunday, and something happened. You know what? My dad was asking it jokes, I think, and it told us a joke, and then my dad asked it about maybe a joke that was off color, and Alexa got offended. Was that what happened, Alexa? Oh, that's right. I unplugged you and broke you. Anyway, that's how it all. It's not my thing. Sorry, Mom. Sorry, Dad. If it's broken, I'll buy a new one. Just not off Amazon. Can you buy it somewhere else? Either way, the money's going to Amazon. There's no way around Bezos.
You're screwed. We
have to go. By the way, we forgot to announce this. Huge announcement. The week of, right before Christmas, that week, the Thursday is the 21st. For those who are not Mug Club members, there are not going to be any shows. Now, the reason there aren't going to be any shows is because, remember last year, the very last show we did was a waterboarding telethon? People out there?
Yes.
And I've had people say, well, how are you going to do worse than waterboarding telethon within the realm of the law? I thought, what could be worse than waterboarding? Well, we're doing no shows that week because on Thursday the 21st or 22nd, I think it's 21st. Thursday the 21st, We found what's worse than waterboarding. We are doing a 16-hour non-stop live stream CNN Christmas telethon. Yeah, Not Gay Jared and I will sit and watch CNN for 16 straight hours. You can watch us watch CNN. We're going to have over a dozen guests. I don't even know who they are, but your favorites from the show, maybe some new people will be walking in through the door in the studio. We'll be watching it. We're going to have some stunts. You're going to be able to purchase us some rewards while we're doing this live. And it's also the debut of a YouTube carol.
A YouTube carol.
A Christmas-themed lesson to be learned.
Can we just drown ourselves?
I thought about it. I can drown myself. I just can't drown you.
Legally?
But then there's also the problem that I'm your employer and the whole key man deal. So if I drown myself, my wife then has to pay for you because you're such a dependent little pisser.
This is true. Those are all true things.
December 21st, 16-hour CNN live stream. Going to be really, really big. Big deal. 16-hour CNN live stream. Tell your friends, and that is free, even if you're not a Mug Club member. You were making a point right there during the break.
Always making a point. Sometimes I make a point. Something I've been thinking about, excuse me, is that...
By the way, he coughed on my face dressed as a rooster earlier today, and I have a sore throat. I have to go do Change My Mind segments. Good. Go ahead.
You're welcome. Merry Christmas. It's the gift that keeps on giving. So what I was thinking about when we're talking...
such a prick.
So bad. I was trying not to break character. I'm like, I'm going to finish this take. I'm going to stick it out. I thought you're a professional.
Because coughing in a humanoid voice is not breaking character dressed as a chicken.
Remember, using audio. I saved that take.
Nary a cluck to be found. Not a single cluck or peacock to be heard, but him coughing up my nasal cavity all day. Go ahead. You had a point.
I had a point.
You had a point.
We're talking about the historicity of Jesus. And it got me thinking that there's been people in my life, and I know people get discouraged a lot because you're trying to convince people of, it could be anything. It could be something about, Jesus. It could be something about why socialism doesn't work. And you can find yourself banging your head against a wall and becoming really easily discouraged because you realize you think you're doing it all right. You've watched all the notes. You've got all your points and your facts down. But I think people should be encouraged that not everyone's going to be reached the same way. Some people oftentimes take different ways. For Jesus, it might be a really historical look at Jesus before they kind of start entertaining it. It might be just you go right to the Bible.
Treating Christians like jackasses.
Or that.
Those kinds of people. I have a lot of great atheists who watch the show, and we have a lot of great common ground with them, but there is a faction that just like, you say like, hey, I'm a Christian. Unsubscribe.
They seem very angry.
No, you're right. It does take patience. And I think a lot of times people are caught in it and you take a snapshot view. And a good example of that is, we're talking about the sort of the preponderance of evidence with Christ. A big argument against the Bible for a long time was, well, one of the biggest historical figures in the Bible, David, there's no evidence at all. And this was used until I think 1993, and then I want to say it was 2003 or 2007 where we uncovered some very significant evidence regarding the kingdom of David. So that was one of the strongest arguments against the historical accuracy of the Bible for atheists, was, well, why don't we have anything else corroborating David if he was this ruler of this great kingdom? Well, now we do. So they move on to another argument. An absence of proof is not necessarily proof of absence. Now, obviously, you have to go based on the information that you have at hand. But sometimes there is a long haul that you have to understand. And that's why we showed the Change My Mind segment that was an hour long. Yeah. And the lady at the end said, well, there's nowhere I would stop an abortion all the way through 9 months. Because I wanted you to see that sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes you win some, you lose some.
And sometimes it's very simple arguments because people have never thought of something before. So you realize, wow, they just never entertained this idea ever. So this is new, and then they kind of catch on really fast.
Right.
There's some people like Donald Aguirre. We had him on this week.
Still a liberal, but coming along. Lindsay Shepherd
nearly took an Antifa stabbing.
Yeah.
And it kind of like, whoa, eyes open.
Eyes open.
Conversation started.
Now, we had that conversation with our video, right? So we only see that. But how many conservatives, how many libertarians do you think were banging their head against the wall with Donald Aguirre 2-3 years ago? How many of them felt like him the way you feel about your social justice warrior friend? Or maybe your family member at Thanksgiving talking about genocide, or whoever it is, right? I mean, there's someone you're trying to convince and it just takes forever. You're thinking, I'm not making any headway here. Yeah. Could be something like, well, the Alexa thing. That's a good example. A lot of people who hated us for a long time, who came out with this conspiracy, and then guess what? Their credibility was blown because it was so clearly false. Sometimes it takes some time. Sometimes it does take patience. And patience, honestly, I will say, it is probably the hardest virtue to attain. It's not one that comes naturally to us. And that's, again, going back to the Christian argument. This idea when people say, well, I don't need some historical spaghetti monster. I don't need some crazy zombie carpenter to tell me how to be a moral person. Here's the deal. Yeah, I get it. You use the example of killing. Sure. I don't need him to tell me not to steal or hurt anybody. Absolutely. But what about to tell you to be patient? Huh? What about to tell you to be loyal? What about to tell you to honor your mother and your father? What about, there are a lot of virtues that actually were seen as weakness for a long time before modern Christianity, or certainly Judeo-Christian ideas. Mercy was not seen as a virtue. So a lot of it runs completely, it's very counterintuitive to your basic, most carnal instincts. And that's sometimes why it takes patience. And you know what? This happens, it takes the same thing in a marriage, whether it's being in class like Lindsay Shepherd, dealing with professors. Life takes patience, and sometimes you just see where you are. Imagine this, me in the Change My Mind segment with the pro-life, and I'm about 40 minutes in going, okay, what's happening? What have I done? What have I done wrong here? Because usually I can make an argument, well, okay, I can acknowledge that that's a life, but I'm still okay with ending it, but I can see your point of view. In almost every case, particularly with pro-life, that's kind of one of my strong suits. But imagine me at 42, 44 minutes in, whatever it was, going, I'm really screwing up here. And if I'd have just stopped and given up, I would have never gotten to the point where she says, I'm fine with abortions up to 9 months anyway. And that was the aha moment. That was the breakthrough moment. And a lot of people just need to go a little bit further. You can see this, and you can see this in people. There are people who naturally do it better, or people who've trained themselves to do it better. A great example is fighters. In a lot of sports, you've heard the term front runner. It's never more clear than in combat sports. There's a good example. A guy named Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira. If you don't know who he is, go look up his highlight here on YouTube. And people will look it up now and see his losing record. But early on when he was young, he would lose every single fight badly until he won. He won a fight against Bob Sapp. If you don't know Bob Sapp, it was in that film, the football film with Adam Sandler, the prison guards.
I know Bob Saget.
Remember that film with Adam Sandler, the prison guards, the Longest Yard?
The Longest Yard.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
The Whole 9 Yards is Bruce Willis. Yeah. So in that film, the big scary black guy, that's Bob Sapp. This guy was huge, and he was just pile driving Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira. Everyone thought, you have to stop this. And then Antonio armbarred the guy, and then he went to the ICU. But here's the thing, he did it like 4 or 5 more times. And he became the UFC champion and defended his championship. He ended up losing down the line. Sure, you win some, you lose some, but this was a guy who was known for losing, then winning. And then you see some people. There are other people who have been amazing. There are people like Hector Lombard as a fighter. I'm using him as an example. You can go look him up, or just take this as the analogy that it is, who came through fighting and was a wrecking ball. And everyone said, no one's going to be able to stop this guy. Oh my God, he's a ball of muscle. He's a freak athlete. Then guess what happened when one person figured him out? Couldn't win a fight. When one person, that happened with Mike Tyson, there was a decline too, but it happened when one person said, no, you know what, I figured this, not going to be bullied, then they lose. There are front runners who, boom, they come out of the gate, and the second they face adversity, they fold. And then there are people, and these are usually people who you see as successful adults. That's often why you go, why was a high school quarterback? Why is he fat and miserable now? Often they've crested because they're front runners. Then there are people who later on, the people you respect later on in your life, if you ask them in almost every case, they were either bullied, they were unsuccessful, they failed a bunch of times until they became the person that you saw today. Just like Donald Aguirre, just like Lindsay Shepherd, you see the person we have on this show, we're able to have a civil, respectful dialogue with. But you know why? Because there are a bunch of other people before us, and we have to acknowledge that. People who loosened the pickle jar before we got to it, and oh, hey, it's open. And sometimes you're the person who tries to loosen it first and you don't get that jar open, and sometimes you're the person who comes along and you get to have yourself a kosher dill. So if you're in that spot right now, believe me, and you know what, actually, as I talk, I've been here. I have been here at some points. I can get to the end of my rope exhausted. We're going into a new year. We're going to be changing some things, building out the studio, hiring new people. It is so trying, but if you just get over that hump, a little bit of patience. Don't take that snapshot. Don't stop at 42 minutes, because you might win at 43. And that's not false optimism, because we get this a lot. It's not false optimism. It's not stupid self-help books. It's not Joel Osteen saying, the Lord only wants riches for you. What about your blinking pattern? Are you morsing the Lord? I don't know, Joel Osteen. It's not this prosperity gospel. It is not fake. It is a very real, very pragmatic way to look at perseverance and persistence. Don't give up at 44 minutes, because there are millions of people who won at 45. 1 more minute, 1 more percentage point, 1 more degree, and water boils. It's hot, it's warm, 1 degree, it boils. Sometimes you got to go that 1 degree. I will see you next week. I need to rest, because CNN live stream in 2 weeks, it's tiring me just thinking about it. I'm gonna quit.
only 10.